Hi, my name is Yishis, and I play a thief on the Blackgate server. Today I'm going to show you more outnumbered fights that I've had in the past week and discuss how I tackle these situations and come out with some awesome kills. So I first open on this group of Tarnished Coast individuals and I'm able to get a quick down on the ranger before the rest of the group notices. I go immediately for a stomp and a nearby Blackgate thief drops a shadow refuge to assist in that. I'm able to succeed in the stomp, and next I open on a ranger trying to revive. However, I'm right in the middle of the enemy group, and so I decide to stealth and evade back, and reopen on a ranger further out. I get some good hits into him, but notice I have too much aggression from the group, so I re-stealth and reposition myself. I drop a tree and heal up, and open again on a ranger, and I'm able to get enough damage into him to drop him down very quickly. However, the group knows that I'm there now, and they're going to AoE on that position, so I decide to pull back out and play evasively, getting a number of cloak and daggers off, and waiting for the group to drop aggression and get a little confused on where I am. I then see that there is an up-leveled elementalist that looks squishy, so I get some good damage into her and am able to drop her before the group can react. I refuge to go for a stomp, however the mesmer gets a dazed puddle off, which totally interrupts the stomp. I follow up and have enough stealth left over in the refuge to finish the stomp on the elementalist. I now engage on a ranger that tried to revive, get very good damage into him, but take aggression from the mesmer, so I have to re-stealth. I move back in and finalize on that ranger with a Heartseeker, get another stealth, heal up, and go for a stomp, getting it off successfully before the enemies can finalize their revive. I mess up my timing on my next cloak and dagger and get immunity to stealth, so I instead Bladestorm in order to gain stability and kite the enemies down the hill. I shadow step away as I'd like to wait for my heal to return and get some cooldowns back on my utilities. Now that I have my heal back available, I use it and re-engage the enemies that have followed me. I jump on a ranger with a really cool unicorn shortbow and reposition myself so that I can get a backstab cleanly into him. However, this ranger ends up being pretty good at playing defensively and evades quite a bit. He is using the sword, which has a good number of evasion tools on it. However, I do my best to stay on him. In retrospect, I probably should have switched to one of the other targets, as a lot of them were far squishier than this player. However, I persist on him and Heartseeker in to catch up with him, manage to get him down, but get dazed enough that I'm not able to get the stomp off before they revive him. I push back in, but decide I'm going to take one more shot on this ranger and try to get a backstab. I end up missing and hitting a mesmer clone and then getting Moa'd. Now the best thing to do in this situation is to hit the Moa number 5, which runs you away and evades all attacks. This lets me kite down the hill. However, the ranger ends up stunning me, so I have to shadow step away, and luckily my blinding powder on low health triggers, which gives me a stealth, and I'm able to fully retreat. I move back up the hill to attempt to re-engage the enemies, but at this point they've disappeared. However, very shortly after, I already have more enemies re-engage me up the hill. I end up jumping on a mesmer, and a second mesmer appears. I stealth up and go in to engage on the staff mesmer. The second mesmer ends up running away, but there's now an Asura Guardian here as well, so a Guardian and mesmer. I continue to persist on the mesmer. However, I missed my stealth on the Guardian due to his block buff, so I'm forced to Bladestorm instead, as I didn't have enough initiative. I managed to get the mesmer down with the Bladestorm and successfully stomp her before the Guardian can res. I get a nice backstab into the Guardian and get him down before he can react, and get a successful stealth stomp on the Guardian. For the next clip, I take on both Tarnished Coast and Kaineng in what turns into a very large Zerg fight where I move in solo and assassinate as much as I can. I open initially on a ranger and several other Tarnished Coast individuals. I get a nice backstab in and immediately Bladestorm, seeing how many are shooting me with projectiles. I know I can get some nice reflections in, which I do. I shadow step away and back and clear conditions, and immediately get a backstab into the engineer. The engineer's low health defensive automatically triggers. I steal to her and get her down, and quickly move in to go for a stomp. However, I'm too slow, and the two enemies are able to double res her successfully. I then realize that I'd also taken out an up-leveled thief with my Bladestorm earlier. I try to stomp but fail, and manage to take out one of the other up-leveled players. I decide to just damage down this enemy. The Guardian tries to use his staff number 5 to knock me down, but fails. I now successfully knock out the second up-leveled thief, and decide to just damage her down as well by dropping the puddle I stole and performing Death Blossom to drop Confusion and do AoE damage. I now get rooted and need to retreat, so I shadow step away to break the root and kite backwards. One of the Norn's elites charges me, and I get knocked down. Luckily, my low health blinding powder triggers, and I'm able to stealth to get away. I pull back and refuge, as I don't have any utilities available, and I don't want to re-engage the enemies in that state. Now that some of my utility timers are coming back, I move back in and re-engage on this ranger. This ranger ends up keeping up a lot of protection on him at a lot of times, and so he makes for a rather tanky target and does some good evades, but I decide to stay on him for now as he looks like a better target than the Elementalist. Into this fight I stay on him quite a bit, however he's fairly defensive, which makes him quite tough to take down, and in retrospect I probably should have picked a squishier target. Nonetheless, I stick on him and get some good damage into him. As you notice, he again has protection up, and he has almost permanent vigor. So I'm forced to continually evade, and with as many evades as he's performing, it makes it very difficult to get off Cloak and Dagger. And if I miss too many of those, I get in a lot of trouble. So I instead decide to switch to this up-leveled enemy, get a nice backstab into her, and her engineering defensive on low health triggers. I try to stealth on the Elementalist and get blinded, so I miss the stealth and have to heal to gain stealth. I manage to get the engineer down, and go for a stomp. I accidentally dropped Shadow Refuge and didn't really need it there, but nonetheless managed to get the stomp off. At this point, I decide the Ranger is again my best target. Again, in retrospect, I should have gotten on the up-leveled Thief there. Instead, since I knew the Ranger was shooting me, I decided to Blade Storm. I stealth up and pull back out, and keep the Ranger as my target, then realize I can get that Thief down, and I get a nice Cloak and Dagger into her and get her down. I go for a stomp, she ports away, and I was too slow to react. So they're able to fully revive her. I get her down again, but she's got her Thieves Guild up, and they'll blind me far too much, so I move in with a stealth and decide to stealth stomp her, which is successful. At this point, I engage again on the Ranger. As you notice, he again has protection, so my damage is a bit weakened, but I stay on him, move in for another backstab, and end up missing it and hitting his pet instead. I re-stealth on a Mesmer Phantasm, which, by the way, those usually make great stealth targets for Cloak and Dagger as they don't move much. I get some more good damage into the Ranger, but he's evading all over the place. I do manage to get another good backstab and get him down. He ends up dazing me, which prevents me from completing the stomp. So I stealth back up and go for a backstab. However, I miss and end up hitting the Elementalist instead. I try to Cloak and Dagger, but the Ranger evades with his sword, so I'm forced to heal in order to get a stealth off. I want to stay on that Ranger, so I steal up to him to keep position on him. Move in. He decides to revive, so I stealth with a Cloak and Dagger and get another backstab in, and manage to get him down. I go for a stomp from behind so the daze can't hit me, and successfully get the stomp off. A thief from Blackgate has now arrived to help out. I kite the Guardian back a bit and get a successful stealth off on him. I now engage the Necromancer and decide to Blade Storm since the enemies were clumped. I end up having to Shadow Step out in order to drop some of the aggression and Shadow Step back to clear conditions. I decide to jump on the Elementalist as he was half health, but he ends up being rather tanky and ends up getting some good heals into himself. So I stealth up and decide I'm going to need to switch targets instead. I realize I'm at half health, and so I refuge to wait for my heal to come back up and gain some utilities. Unfortunately, I didn't realize the other Blackgate thief was in trouble, so I unfortunately lose him. I steal from the Necro and use the Fear. The Necro then goes into his elite form and is spamming blind. Unfortunately, it's too dangerous for me to stay and try to fight toe-to-toe when I'm getting spam blind, as I can't Cloak and Dagger. The Necromancer is also doing a good job of keeping that AoE on me, so I have to wait for that form to end in order to be able to safely re-engage. I then jump back on the Necromancer and manage to get some good hits into her. However, she goes into her Necromancer form and ends up being quite tanky to the point that I decide I need to just pull off. I stealth up and then notice that Kaineng is now engaging Tarnished Coast from behind. So I decide to push into their Zerg in order to stagger my positioning. I jump on an Elementalist and manage to get him down quite quickly. I go for a stomp knowing that he's going to mist form, so I decide to jump on the Ranger expecting that he'll try to revive the Elementalist. I manage to get him down as well and go for a stomp. The Ranger is smart though and uses his daze to interrupt me. I then manage to damage down the Elementalist fully, and then switch to take out the Ranger. I decided it would be smart to jump on the Tarnished Coast player and let him finish off the Ranger. However, the Ranger's pet starts to use Lick the Wounds, which heals the Ranger and manages to let him revive before I can notice and get a stomp off. So I stealth back up and decide I'm going to get back on that Ranger since he was very squishy. I get him down again and go for a stomp. However, one of his friends comes in and drops a Daze Puddle, and so I'm unable to complete the stomp. I Cloak and Dagger on the bear, but it has the block buff, so I have to waste more initiative. So instead I use Dagger Storm in order to do damage and escape, since I did not have enough initiative to Cloak and Dagger again. I drop a Refuge and reset a little bit, then jump on the Ranger and take him fully down as he'd been downed enough times to fully dispatch of him. I then move in and engage on another Ranger. I try to Cloak and Dagger twice and end up missing it, so I lose a lot of initiative on that, but manage to finish off that Ranger with a Heartseeker. I go for a stomp, but he moves away and I can't really re-engage with the Daze Puddle that the enemy put on him. I stealth back up and switch to a different new squishy target to again stagger my positioning. Manage to take her out very quickly, go for a stomp, but she ends up moving away, and I have to reset some as enough of the enemies came and started AoEing on that position. I shadow step back and engage on a warrior, but again take enough AoE damage that I didn't feel it was safe to stay engaged there, as 1 CC would have been enough to shut me down there since I did not have shadow step up. So I instead Cloak and Dagger a few times on this Ranger to safely take him out without having to worry about getting CC'd and shut down. I stealth up and get a very nice backstab on this thief to quickly dispatch of her. She ports away and I don't have time or the safety to look for her to get a stomp off, so I switch back and get on this Ranger. I get some good damage into her and manage to take her out and go for a stomp. I'm successful in the stomp, but Tarnished Coast notices her down and goes to do AoE in the area, which I take a lot of collateral damage from, so at this point I need to fully reset and pull out and wait for some of my cooldowns to come back. Now that my heal is more available, I move in and decide to engage on Tarnished Coast in the back. I take a knockdown from the Ranger pet, but manage to get the Ranger down. I stealth up and go for a stomp. While I'm successful in the stomp, from the keep, they're shooting a cannon at me, which hits me and knocks me down. I decide that I'm going to stay on this Mesmer, which was a very poor decision on my part, as the person shooting the cannon has some very good range and really does a lot of damage to me, to the point that I actually do get downed by that cannon. I port away to avoid another cannon shot, and the other Blackgate thief is around and does a great job rezzing me, which I really appreciate. I switch over and jump on a Kaineng thief and get her down successfully, and get a successful stomp. The other Blackgate thief and I then engage a Ranger, and their teammates don't notice, so we're able to successfully get him down. We then have a Mesmer engage, and I switch over and decide to get a nice backstab on that thief. I then decide to Blade Storm, since I know the thief could re-engage, and I see there's an Elementalist in Tornado form, so I would prefer to cripple the thief and gain stability in case I were to get knocked down by the Tornado. I stealth up and see a low-health Engineer, so I engage on him quickly and take him down. And I go for a stomp, figuring I can get it off because Kaineng and Tarnished Coast are busy fighting each other. That's successful, and I re-stealth, and then decide I'm going to engage on this Elementalist. Finishing off the remaining Tarnished Coast player, I then get my heal off and push further on the Elementalist, doing enough damage to successfully get him down. However, the Quaggan guards then engage, and there's enough damage going around, and I don't have any heal or utilities up available, so I stealth up and get a new perspective on the fight. I attempt to re-engage one more time, again having to get a heal off. I move in and decide I'm going to hit this thief. I miss and hit a clone instead, and decide that at this point, without a heal, I need to just pull out and let things reset some and get some utilities and my heal back. Next, I decide to push back in towards the keep, and I jump back on this Mesmer. I am speeding the fight up here a little bit, as this portion is not quite as exciting. I do take the Mesmer down, just an up-leveled Mesmer, and we finish him off, and then move in and do damage to the remaining Kaineng Elementalist. We do manage to get him down as well, and get a successful stomp on him. And at this point, I'm going to go and take out the Guardian from Tarnished Coast. push on him pretty hard. He does some decent damage, but I kind of just kite around him and avoid his larger hits. He goes invulnerable here. Finish off with a Heartseeker and Refuge, seeing a large Tarnished Ghost Zerg coming in. I get the stomp off successfully and then push through the Zerg and to the back so that I can take out the tail end without gaining the aggression or the notice of the larger Zerg. I successfully get good damage into an engineer at the back and take him down, and then I'm able to successfully stomp him. A Mesmer then comes in to attempt to revive the engineer. I get a stealth off on him, and I steal and use the stolen ability to gain all buffs, and then put large damage into him in order to take him down, and then gain a successful stomp. The ranger from earlier in the fight has now returned, and I'm going to engage on him. I get some good damage into him. He again has protection on him, so the damage is a little bit weak. I stealth up, and he's going to again use his evade abilities and make it a bit more difficult for me to reliably get stealths on him. I do manage to get a couple more good backstabs into him, and then go aggressive with some Heartseekers in order to finish him off while he's low. I stealth up, go for a stomp, again taking a daze from him, and stomp one more time to finish him off. I stealth up and engage the ranger that has now come in. She's rather squishy, so I stealth and do a few more backstabs and manage to take her down quickly as well, and gain another successful stomp. At this point, I see two Tarnished Coast Guardians coming in. I engage one. She ends up being rather tanky, so I'm speeding up the fight a little bit as it's just a lot of kiting around to avoid the larger damage hits. She rings me, and so I decide I need to shadow step out to get out of that ring. The other Guardian then leaps to me and tries to pull me in. His pull is successful, and so I shadow step back in order to break that crowd control and gain the upper hand. I move back in and get good damage on the Char Guardian and daze him. I push on him hard, but end up taking enough damage from them that I need to refuge and let things reset some. I move in one more time, get some more hits on the Char Guardian, but a Ranger then binding roots me, and then I get immobilized. So I use my Dagger Storm to pull out with stability up, kite back with Heartseeker, and push through further. I then end up kiting into more Tarnished Coast and get immobilized, so I stealth, and I end up stealing to the Thief in order to steal his stealth and use the stealth to be able to fully escape. With no utilities up, the steal was a good way to escape quickly. For this final fight, I engage a Mesmer and Guardian, stealth up, and get a backstab on the Mesmer to quickly knock her down. I stealth again and get a successful stomp as the Guardian decided to ring instead of revive. I now engage aggressively on the Guardian, get an evade followed by a backstab in quick succession. The Guardian goes immune with his elite, but I stay on him very aggressively. Move in for another backstab, can't quite reach him, so I use Heartseeker to close the gap, and then finish him off. He knocks me back, but I move in and now get a trick shot stomp right here. I'll now show the gear that I use. I use Valkyrie armor with Divinity runes, Berzerker weapons, and Berzerker jewels. I have a Sigil of Fire and Sigil of Force on my daggers. I have an Ascended backpiece with Berzerker stats. For food, I use 100 toughness, 70 precision, and Hardened Sharpening Stone for more power. And here's an overview of my traits. All of this will be in the video description as well. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed.